American politics often feels like a storm that never ends. One moment, it's a courtroom fight in Utah, the next, it's a budget showdown in Washington. Then suddenly, headlines about Secret Service protection, or even military presence on D.C. streets. This week has been no exception. In fact, it has felt like an entire season of a political drama, condensed into just a few days. Here's what we'll cover today: a federal judge ordering Utah to redraw its congressional map, and what that means for fair representation. Congress stumbling toward another government shutdown as funding deadlines loom. The controversy over Kamala Harris losing extended Secret Service protection. A remarkable federal takeover of Washington, D.C. as local police. And finally, turmoil at the CDC and a wave of federal layoffs that could reshape how government works. On the surface, these stories may look separate, but if you follow the thread, they all tie back to one central theme: the redistribution of power. Who holds it, who loses it, and how that tug of war shapes the lives of ordinary Americans. So let's slow down, take a deep breath, and unpack each scene of this week in U.S. politics. In deep red Utah, you might think politics is predictable, but this week, a federal judge threw the state's congressional map into chaos. The judge ruled that the map, drawn by the Republican legislature, unfairly diluted Democratic votes by splitting Salt Lake City into 4 districts. That carving up of communities is what political scientists call gerrymandering. It's been part of American politics for centuries, but courts are increasingly willing to step in when the manipulation is too obvious. The order is simple, but explosive: redraw the map by September 24th. Republican leaders quickly announced they would appeal the ruling, but they also promised to comply if the appeal fails. And of course, former President Trump blasted the decision, framing it as yet another attack on Republican dominance. Why does this matter beyond Utah? Because redistricting shapes the balance of power in the House of Representatives. If one state cracks open even a single competitive district, it could shift the majority margin in Washington. With the 2026 midterms already on the horizon, both parties know how much is at stake. For Utah voters, it means the possibility, just the possibility, of a district where their voices aren't drowned out. For the rest of the country, it's a reminder maps are not neutral. They are political weapons, and right now, the courts are being asked to referee the fight. Next, let's turn to Washington, where the clock is ticking. September 30 is the deadline to pass spending bills. And once again, Congress is on the verge of missing it. Democratic leaders, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries are calling for a Big Four meeting with Republican leadership. Their goal to hammer out a short-term funding deal to keep the government open. But Republicans are divided. Some want a clean short-term extension, others demand sweeping cuts and policy riders, even if it means a shutdown. Here's why that matters. A shutdown doesn't just freeze federal agencies. It can delay paychecks for military families, halt inspections, slow social security services, and ripple into local economies. For ordinary Americans, it means long lines at airports, closed, national parks, and anxiety about whether essential services will keep running. And yet here's the irony: Wall Street doesn't always panic. Analysts point out that in past shutdowns, the stock market barely budged, and in some cases, dips became buying opportunities. So while retirees and civil servants feel the sting, investors sometimes shrug. The larger issue is trust. Every shutdown, or even the threat of one, erodes public confidence that Congress can handle the basics, keeping the lights on. And in politics, lost trust is much harder to restore than lost dollars. Now to the headlines surrounding former Vice President Kamala Harris. After leaving office, Harris was granted extended Secret Service protection by President Biden, a courtesy that went beyond the legal requirement. But President Trump revoked that extension last week. The timing is important. Harris is launching a national book tour, traveling from city to city, meeting crowds. Without federal protection, she relies on local police and private security, which critics argue is inadequate given her profile. Trump's supporters say the decision was about following the law when you're no longer in office. You don't get indefinite protection. But opponents argue it looks like political retaliation, stripping away safety for someone who could still be a powerful political voice. California officials are already considering stepping in with state resources. But the symbolism here is undeniable. In politics, protection isn't just about safety. It's a signal of legitimacy, of respect, of recognition. Removing it sends a message, whether intended or not, about who deserves a place on the stage. In August, something extraordinary happened. President Trump invoked a rarely used power to federalize Washington, D.C. as metropolitan police and deploy National Guard troops. His justification? A supposed crime emergency. But here's the twist: official data shows violent crime in D.C. has dropped to its lowest level in 30 years. So what's really happening? Many observers see it as a political move, designed to project law and order toughness in the nation's capital, to show strength on camera even if the statistics tell a different story. The legal challenges came immediately. D.C. has fought for decades for Home Rule, the right to govern itself. This move by the White House is seen by many as undermining that autonomy. The courts will now decide how far presidential power extends in the nation's capital. But for everyday residents of D.C., the message is mixed. On one hand, they see more officers and soldiers on their streets. On the other, they wonder whether the federal government trusts them to govern their own community. The political theater is playing out, but the stage is their neighborhood. Finally, let's talk about health and the federal workforce. President Trump abruptly dismissed CDC Director Susan Menarez and replaced her with Jim O'Neill, a longtime ally. The shakeup caused shockwaves. Dozens of senior scientists resigned in protest, warning that the agency's integrity is at risk. Public health groups are demanding oversight, fearing that science could be overshadowed by politics. And the CDC is not alone. Across federal agencies, layoffs are accelerating. Nearly 200,000 civil servants have already lost their jobs. In what the administration frames as deep state downsizing, cuts are hitting social programs, regulatory agencies, and even national parks. Supporters argue this is long overdue, trimming bloated bureaucracy. Critics counter that these layoffs hollow out the very institutions that keep food safe, protect the environment, and respond to crises. The truth may be both some government programs are inefficient, but gutting expertise comes at a cost. And when the next public health emergency arrives, the country may discover just how high that cost is. So what ties all of this together? Utah's redistricting fight, the looming shutdown, Secret Service controversies, federalized police, CDC upheaval. At first glance, these are separate stories, but the common thread is power. Who draws the lines, who controls the purse, who gets protection, who commands the streets, and who decides the role of science. Each of these moves shifts power from one place to another, leaving ordinary Americans to absorb the consequences. Whether it's delayed social security checks, changes in representation, or weakened public health defenses, the cost eventually shows up in daily life. Politics may look like theater, but for families, retirees, workers, and students, it is reality. Thank you for watching this long dive into the week in U.S. politics. If you found this helpful, if you want more stories unpacked in plain language, then don't just watch. Hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe, because the show will go on, and we'll be here every week to read between the lines together.